All right, so today I want to talk about challenge and difficulty in games. I think this is something that follows pretty well from character progression. It's kind of a continuation of it. You know, a lot of times the systems are kind of tied together. How much challenge does somebody have to overcome in order to progress? So I thought it was a good next topic. And hopefully this is useful for, game designers. Hopefully it's useful for players even, or at least of interest. But especially if you're, running a tabletop game, maybe something Dungeons and Dragons, something like Artifacts. You'll get a lot out of this as far as, how much difficulty should you put into your encounters, your campaign, that kind of thing. What is sort of the sweet spot for challenge. So, first of all, what is challenge and difficulty? It seems pretty self-explanatory, but, difficulty can come in many different forms. It can be very easy, right? There's very little difficulty, or there's a lot of difficulty. But challenge is kind of like the sweet spot of how much difficulty, right? It's going to be different for everyone. People are going to be looking for different things. They're going to come from different skill levels, different backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. But if you can get that perfect amount of difficulty, enough to just push the player to work harder or to get through something, they can just barely accomplish something, that's often where that sweet spot of how much difficulty you want to put in to still challenge the player, to still keep them engaged. So why is it fun? Why do we care about making games challenging or difficult? Well, people play games a lot of times to accomplish things. They enjoy the challenge. People do that in life. Their jobs, their hobbies. They always want to learn more, progress. It's just kind of built into human beings, and games are no different. Not that every game has to, push your mental faculties, so you're challenging yourself to some intense degree. Some games are much more easygoing, slower paced, and that's fine too. But a lot of people find it really, really satisfying to push themselves. If you do something hard in a game, right, you're satisfied to have beaten the game, to have overcome an obstacle, right? Unlocking more content in a game. It's another thing that feels very satisfying. Oh, this was not available to everyone. I'm kind of, exclusively getting this achievement or this new bit of content. Ton of fun, really, really satisfying for people. So I think this one, it's pretty easy to just get into some examples, good and bad. And I want to start with bad. Picking on Oblivion again, a game that I pick on a lot. As I mentioned before, it's got that kind of flat scaling across the game, right? As you level up, the world levels up around you, and because of that, it's not getting more difficult over time. The difficulty level is kind of flat. There's no real curve. As your character is getting better, well, because other characters are getting better, they're not really pushing you to be better. They're not pushing you to challenge your character building skills, your ability to play the game better. It's just kind of flat the whole time, and a lot of times what you're looking for is this kind of early teaching, or maybe it's an early wall, an early obstacle someone's got to get through, and then you're going to increase the difficulty over time, but again, just kind of keeping it ahead of where the player's skill or the character's ability is at, so that it's a constant challenge, constantly in that sweet spot. And a game like Oblivion with that flat scaling, anything with that flat scaling, I think really falls flat in that. Borderlands, a game that I really, really like. It's got tons of content, tons of side quests, tons of main content, and there's some really great, funny writing, good story moments, new areas that you want to explore. But the problem is, they've got so much of it. There's all this content, and because it's all kind of sideways, progression-wise, what happens is the difficulty levels of these quests that you've opened up, this side content you've opened up, suddenly it becomes too easy. And now to go and experience that fun story moment, that well done part of writing, well, you don't want to do it because you're way over leveled for the area. So kind of, trying to get around the the flat scaling problem by having, well, here's a set difficulty, but not really a way to accomplish all of the content while still challenging yourself as you go through. A lot of the old, like, Nintendo games, right? Super Nintendo games, I'm sure people have played these games where the difficulty's ramped up just way too high, right? It is unfair. It is not challenging. It is bullshit. There's enemies that respawn at ridiculous times. The games are just made to be very, very difficult because it was a time where you didn't have access to that many games, and if you wanted to get longevity out of a game, probably the easiest way to do that was just to make it very, very difficult. And a lot of times, you had to play around these kind of unfair mechanics, and you almost had to cheat the game to win a lot of times. There's the classic Mega Man example. I don't even know the boss's name, but people found out the trick of shooting that lightning gun through it, and then you gotta pause, unpause repeatedly just to actually kill it, because it's such a difficult enemy to actually beat the game. So way, way, way too hard. Although sometimes it can be fun to have a level of difficulty that's very, very high up. It's not really fun when it's unfair. And finally, got your Final Fantasies, your Pokemon games, games with these random encounters that don't pose any kind of real threat. Now, there's nothing wrong with random encounters as a concept. They could be fun, but if I'm going to have hundreds, maybe even thousands of them throughout the game, and 90+% of them pose no challenge to me at all, well, now you're just wasting my time, right? It's not. It might be like a fun thing to play with every now and then. Well, the game mechanics are fun. I like leveling up my Pokemon or my characters or whatever. But do I really need to spend 25 hours doing something that's not difficult in order to do it? I would much rather that kind of content scales with me. And these encounters are fun and difficult the whole time. Plus, they often provide, right, this like out-of-combat element where you can heal up and then get into the next challenge, right, or the next random encounter that's not challenging, and make sure that it certainly isn't challenging by healing up full. But there's some good examples too, right? Dark Souls, I think, is a great example of challenge, and some people might be like, it's too hard. That falls into the unfair category. And fair enough, there's different preferences, there's different outtakes or outlooks, on difficulty, and maybe that's just considered kind of unfair in some elements of the game. Yeah, I'd give you that nod. But I would say it's more fair than a lot of those Super Nintendo games. It really catered to the audience of people who like single-player games that are difficult. And it gives you that difficulty right away. You don't have to play through a bunch of opening tutorial bits that are really, really easy. You don't have those random encounters. It's like anything that is there and available to you is going to be very, very difficult, and it's super satisfying to get through. If you beat a boss, man, if you beat the game, like, people really think, oh man, you're good at games, because I know just how challenging it is. But it's a game that really has you coming back again and again. As difficult as it is, you want to overcome those obstacles. Mario and Portal, two platforms I really want to highlight. It's just easy to get into, right? The beginning's easy, and it teaches you very fast. So, level 1 of Mario, you run, you jump. Okay, pretty simple mechanics. Portal, it starts unlocking these portals, showing you the concept of the game, and it's just got these really great progressive jumps in difficulty, where it's constantly teaching you new mechanics just as you play. Every level, every stage is slightly harder than the last one. It's pushing your brain, and these are games that I just think have it down. If you want to look at like perfect difficulty progression, these platformers absolutely have it down. So I have to call this out. Other ones, StarCraft and chess. Love both games. They've got just a crazy high skill cap, right? Almost unlimited. And the fact that it's a PvP game, or both are PvP games, other people are still playing, other people are still getting better. And so if other people are getting better with a basically unlimited skill cap, well, you have to do the same. You have to keep up. Again, not for everyone. Not everyone likes PvP. Not everyone likes playing the same game for 1,000 hours just to be like competent at a competitive level. But for people who are very, very competitive, those games are going to keep you engaged for a long, long time by just challenging you again and again. And that PvP aspect on a game that you can't really master, I can't state that enough. It will keep its longevity going for as long as the game's around, as long as it's fun to play. What's going on here? Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley might seem crazy. You might be like, well, those are some of the easiest games ever, if you can even call it a challenge, even call it any difficulty. But what they do is they kind of let the players set their own level of difficulty, their own challenges, right? Do you need to grow, this many crops or make friends with this person? Well, you don't need to. But if as a player that sounds like fun, you kind of start making those goals for yourself. So once you're achieving your own goals, it's very satisfying. You can do it at your own pace. You could do it in a day if you want to sit there and grind it out, assuming it's not something you've got to wait for. Or you can do it, over the span of weeks. It's just, it's on your commute or something. While you're on the train, you're going to take a look at your crops or go, make friends with somebody. Having that in the hands of players really encompasses a lot of variety in how much do you like challenge. Do you want to get all the achievements or accolades within the game? Well, you can do that. You can spend all your time in this world, or you can just play it really, really casually and not really worry about it, and you're not punished for it, right? Divinity Original Sin, both 1 and 2, do a fantastic job with difficulty levels. So difficulty levels we'll talk about a bit later. Something that I think most games get wrong, right? I'll go back and pick on Oblivion. With that flat scaling, difficulty levels just do, hey, monsters have more HP, they do more damage, and it's going to take you longer to kill them. But it doesn't actually force you to play the game that much better. If you can work out, get in, get a couple swings, get out, get in, get a couple swings, get out, you've mastered the game already. It's just going to take longer for you to actually, get through these challenges or obstacles. Whereas Divinity Original Sin, they break up their difficulties into story mode. I think it's normal or regular and tactician. So if you want to experience the story, you're not really keen on, challenging combat, all those kinds of mechanics, pick that. You're gonna breeze through the combat totally fine, but there's this amazing story to experience, and you can enjoy the game that way. If you're way more on the side of I like tactical combat, right, challenging combat, well, there's a mode for that. And they don't just scale the HP and the damage. They do that, right? They increase how much health and how much damage enemies do. But they actually add new enemies in. They give the AI advanced tactics. They're going to put their back to a wall so you can't backstab them. They're going to shoot a water barrel so that they can electrify it later. Things that you wouldn't get in story or the normal mode. So a really, really good way of doing difficulty levels, which is something I generally would shy away from. Dungeons and Dragons and, of course, Artifacts, gotta shout that out. They do something really well, which is it's a bit of a unique experience having a game master run the game, right? They come up with this narrative, this story, this world. What are the encounters going to be? What are their challenges and obstacles going to be? Whether it's fighting enemies or whether it's an investigative story or something like that. It's all up to this one game master, a dungeon master. And because they know the players personally, right, they can talk to them outside of the game. They can see how they're adjusting to things. They're able to make this difficulty on the fly, or they're able to cater it exactly to the audience, as opposed to something like you say Dark Souls is catered to an audience that loves difficult games. Okay, well, that's great, but you can try with these different difficulty levels or whatever, you can try to cater it to different audiences, but really how many can you meet, and can you give them this kind of true experience? But if you know what your audience wants, you know they want something very challenging or not very challenging, or where they want the challenge to be, inside combat, outside combat, puzzle solving, whatever it is, you can deliver that experience. And if you're seeing that they're not having fun with something, or that they are gravitating towards something that they enjoy, put in more of that, put in less of this. It's a really, really interesting and unique way to approach difficulty and challenge. Now, something that Dungeons & Dragons doesn't do really well, that I really tried to rectify when I made Artifacts, is there's all this RNG in the game, right? These random numbers. You're rolling dice. Am I going to hit? Am I going to miss? And when you're designing a combat encounter, you have to account for the possibility that dice rolls just don't go the player's way, or maybe they go way too favorably. So critical hits, misses, all kinds of stuff. It's hard to account for because you want something that's challenging, but there's this external element that you can't control. And it's not, we don't have saved games or anything, right? This is a story that just continues on and on. So if you lose, you could be dead, you could lose your character that you love so much. That's a thing that ends up being very difficult for game masters to overcome. So in Artifacts, what I tried to do, a way to rectify that is get rid of all the RNG. There's no dice rolls. Everything is deterministic. And so if you're designing a combat encounter, you have a really good idea what the players are capable of and what the enemies are capable of. And because of that, you can say, well, they're probably actually going to win this encounter, but it's going to be very, very difficult. Or, this is a bit easier, and based on how they've gotten there, they kind of deserve to win that or something. So unless they make a lot of mistakes, then they should more easily win that. And having these tools in place within your game, if you're designing something, I think is really important to think of it from, like a game master's perspective. Are they able to deliver the type of challenge and difficulty that they intend to? So those are just some examples, some good, some bad. But why do games get it wrong? Because I'm sure you've played lots of games that I've given examples here. There's lots of bad examples of it. And I don't think they're necessarily intentional. So one thing that I notice a lot is game designers try to cater to wider audiences and way too much. So they say, we want everyone to be able to play the game, so it's got to be accessible, it's got to be dumbed down. And if you do that, you're going to make more money because, more people are going to come and play your game. So oftentimes this has really lengthy tutorials. You get this stupid interruption. You press the A button to jump. Look around with the joysticks, and it's like we've all done this a million times, but they drag it on. The main content tends to be far too easy. You've got this main story that they want everyone to be able to accomplish. Everyone can beat the main story, but it's the side content that's a little bit more difficult. And it really makes it unsatisfying as a player who enjoys the difficult side content to then come back and beat the main story because, it was too easy. I've already done something more difficult. Sure, I saved the world by doing this, but did it feel more satisfying to do? Not really. Difficulty levels, like I said, they're slapped on a lot of times. They just have, higher HP, higher damage. It doesn't necessarily equate to more fun if you want a challenging experience. If you have new monsters, you require new tactics. If you can, increase the difficulty level of puzzles, if it's kind of like a puzzle game, great. Have these new experiences in different difficulty levels. That's fine. But just making a game, again, that's catered to a wider audience and then just sticking a hard mode on, it's not necessarily satisfying. And a lot of times what that does is it just forces players to exploit the game, right? They'll figure out overpowered builds or tactics or whatever. That's something they've done a lot of studies on. If players find that there's an optimal way to play, even if it's not more fun, you could do your crazy Devil May Cry, jump around, use 20 different moves to get an S rank combo, or you could just mash the X button repeatedly. Players will just mash the X button at some point, generally speaking. There's also this misconception that difficult games don't sell well. So again, going back to this catering to wide audiences, people think, well, if it's simpler, we can generate more money, get more revenue. One thing that completely disproves that is PvP games, right? League of Legends, StarCraft, chess, all these things, extremely popular, and they've got crazy longevity. They generate tons of money, and these are the most difficult games you could play, like, on the planet. People are still getting better. Difficulty continues to go up as players get better. There's so much challenge, this unlimited skill cap, and yeah, people love it. It is somewhat important to make it, I think, accessible. Something like StarCraft and RTS, where you're managing multiple units, is often less accessible than a MOBA game where you're controlling one unit. Okay, it's easier to wrap my head around one unit, but the skill cap on both genres, both like a League and a StarCraft, are extremely high, basically unlimited. So if you can make it a bit easier to get into, sure, but don't be scared about the unlimited skill cap. Lots of old Nintendo games, Blizzard games, they've kind of proven that you can make games, right, like StarCraft or even a Diablo in like Hell mode. You can make these things that are very difficult, but you got to make them easy to get into. It's the simple to learn, difficult to master concept. Even like Mario, some things like that, right? It's maybe they're not the most challenging games, but do you want to get every single star? Well, that's actually a little bit more challenging. You gotta, solve some puzzles, go through some difficult ones, but to beat the game, you don't need all of them. But everyone can get in and jump around as Mario, right? So following that kind of idea is really not a bad thing. And then I want to look at other games. Like, it doesn't have to be a PvP game. A game like Dark Souls, it caters to a niche audience, right? It says we are going to be unapologetically difficult. That's it. Whether you enjoy that experience or not, that's fine. But if you do, this is the game for you. It's sold extremely well. It's launched a whole new IP. You've got the Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne franchises now kind of born out of that. And that's probably going to continue to grow. People love it. It's even brought in people who maybe didn't think that they would like such a challenging experience. I've seen it reach a really, really wide audience in the time that it's been around. And it's proven that you can have financial success. Now, is it as much financial success as maybe a mobile title, a Candy Crush, something like that? Okay, maybe not. But you can still make your desired game that's very, very difficult without compromising the difficulty, without compromising the challenge that you want to be there, right? Don't be scared to make a game that is difficult. It can succeed, even though I think there's a lot of people telling you that it can't. So just to summarize this whole thing, right? Various levels of difficulty. They're fun for different audiences. Some people like it, some people don't. But there's different ways to cater to that. You can put it in the hands of the players. You can just make a game that's catered to one audience. Have it as the simple to learn, difficult to master. They're all acceptable. They're there for different audiences. They're going to strike different people, but just you're fine doing any one of those. In a game that's trying to offer challenge, if there's sections in that game that just aren't challenging, then, well, they're not fun, right? If there's random encounters that waste your time, just don't have them in the game. Don't prolong the length of the game just for the sake of doing it. Only have those experiences that are in there to be challenging. A game's got to continue to deliver challenge in some way, right? Either make the player get better, make the character get better, some combination of both. But you want to kind of push them along that curve. Start at an acceptable level of challenge, end at an acceptable level of challenge. It should be this moving target as you go throughout the game. Difficulty levels, very often an imperfect way to deliver challenge. There's a few examples. Divinity is a great example for it. Being able to game master your own experience, where you can kind of tweak things as you're going. That's also a great example of how to do it. But just slapping on those difficulty levels, don't think that that's enough to cater to both the simple, I want an easy experience, and I want a difficult experience. Really put some thought into those difficulty levels if you're going to put them in the game. And finally, don't be scared to make a difficult game. It's fine. People like challenges. There's PvP games. There's Dark Souls. There's really, really difficult things. And don't let all that buzz about wider audiences, mobile gaming that's simple and accessible, don't let that get you. Make the experience that you want to make. And if you're a player, don't accept these lesser quality games that just slap difficulty on or whatever. Really go for games that understand what difficulty means and they cater to the difficulty level that you're working on.